Hello and welcome! By the time you're watching this, the Warriors of Chaos release for Warhammer the Old World is less than 24 hours away. This will sadly be the last release for Warhammer the Old World this year. My prediction that we would see every army getting a release in 2024 has been proven to be wrong. We will have to wait until 2025 for the Empire, the High Elves, and everything else. But for today, I thought I would turn our minds back to Warriors of the Chaos as they appeared in the far and distant past, because I think it might give us an indication of something that Games Workshop could do going forward. Here is my thoughts. Okay, so back in 1998, Warhammer Fantasy Battle 5th edition was going strong. Just a mere couple of months earlier, the Realm of Chaos expansion had been released, which gave the new and improved, written by Thomas Pirinen, rules for Warriors of Chaos, complete with a deck of Chaos gift cards, their own spell decks, everything you needed to play the dark powers of Chaos. One thing, though, that was lacking from the Realm of Chaos book, as it was dubbed, was special characters. These, of course, had been a staple of Warhammer Fantasy Battle throughout 4th edition. They had numerous other special characters in different army books. Dwarves had loads, Bretonnians had tons, which I've been in the action of trying to collect all of. Chaos got nothing in the Realm of Chaos book, and this initially might have caused some initial discontent. However, what they got instead was what remains one of the best Chaos books to have been published for Warhammer Fantasy, in my memory certainly. That is, the Champions of Chaos book. Now, funnily enough, this does reflect somewhat on how things appear at the time, appear now. At the time, there was quite a bit of grumbling of why do we have to pay £12 for a whole extra book to get our special characters? Yes, I know, £12, goodness me. I mean, that's basically almost the price of an arcane journal now. And it was actually, thinking about it, about the same thickness as the flavour pamphlets. What you got for your money, though, was far and beyond anything that had previously been released for kind of the different armies. Whereas before, special characters made a worthwhile but black and white, you know, scant section at the back of the book after the main army list and before you got to any kind of final thoughts or the miniatures catalogue that made an appearance in a lot of those early army books. That's where special characters were relegated. In the Champions of Chaos book, you got a piece of short fiction, essentially, describing the life and times of each of the special characters that featured in the book. You got a plethora of special characters, far more than any other army, including the Bretonnians, who, let me stress, got loads. A plethora of special characters. Special characters for pretty much all of the gods, special characters for Undivided, special characters for beasts, for demons. You want it, you got it. What this meant was that rather than trying to cram these into what was already probably the chunkiest army book that Games Workshop had released up to that point, you got a whole separate book that gave them the time and space to be fleshed out in proper detail with a full colour section as well. And this is genuinely, I think, one of the best things that they could have done for Chaos. What does it mean for Warhammer the Old World, though? There's a reason I'm bringing this up, and it's not just because I like to wax lyrical about Old Hammer. It's this. We're getting 2 special characters in the flavour pamphlet for Warriors of Chaos. I mean, yeah, okay, I suppose when you take into account beasts, presuming they get at least 2, that will be 4, which is still more than a lot of the other factions have received. But compared to some of the other armies, it does feel a little bit of a shortfall. However, they have made quite clear that the reason for this is that they wanted to devote themselves... Well, they said they wanted to devote themselves to more kind of non-god specific special characters. And then, so we're getting the Chainmaker special character, the Seawolf kind of Viking Barbarian Raider special character. More on her when I get my hands on a copy of the Arcane Journal and can review it. And then we're getting Galraksh, the first Dragon of Chaos, who's possessed by a Lord of Change, so is specific to Tzeentch. Yeah, I don't understand it entirely either. What I hope, though, is that Games Workshop may not have closed the door on giving special characters for other aspects of the Warhammer lore, because Warriors of Chaos, in particular in the era that we're talking about, the kind of 2265, 2267 era of the Old World history, had more characters around and alive at that point that was then kind of published in later editions of the rules than basically any other army. I think the vampires are the only other ones that kind of come close, with the various kind of vampires who are hanging around or who had been killed and then risen from the dead again in the way that vampires are wont to do. Just let me rattle through briefly some of the special characters who featured in Champions of Chaos and also in subsequent publications who were active. We know were active during the time that Warhammer the Old World is set. Not only that, characters who had models, characters that Games Workshop have existing miniatures for, that they could easily just kind of haul out of the back catalogue. I mean, hell, I've got at least 2 of them, and I know friends of mine who've got some of the others. I'm sure if we put our mind to it, we could probably put every single special character that featured in Champions of Chaos that got a model on the tabletop. And this is all kind of characters who were around during the time that Warhammer the Old World is set. Let me go through them with you briefly. Okay, so first up, Acold Hellbrass. This is a champion of Tzeentch. He was blessed by the Lord of Change with the gift of life, which basically means he's immortal. He can never die because he is in a constant kind of roiling state of death and rebirth within his suit of armour. Not only that, but he carries with him this kind of aura of life, which means that anyone who comes near to him is liable to be resurrected as well. I mean, he is absolutely crying out. Let me just say now, most of the Champions of Chaos are crying out for some Black Library attention because they are absolutely brilliant characters. Acold Hellbrass had a miniature, as you can see here. This is an easy one for Games Workshop to resurrect. I've got him. I might even paint him up for my Warriors of Chaos army because he's a cool model. He was armoured with the Wind Blade, a magical sword through which the winds of chaos flew, which had kind of unique and cool special rules that allowed him to do different things with it depending on what you rolled up at the start of the game. Let's move on though. Who else was around and active at this time? Well, Arbol the Undefeated, appropriately named champion of Khorne, blessed to ride on Khorne's own pet Fleshhound, the alpha of all the Fleshhounds, essentially. This was a kind of frenzied and berserk chaos character. Again, Games Workshop, you've got the model for it, or if you felt like it, you could easily convert one up for him, or Games Workshop, you could just, release a new model for him. But in any event, he was absolutely, we know that he was active during this period. Who else did they do release models for? Well, there was a Demon Prince of Slaanesh, or Demon Princess, I suppose you'd call her, of Slaanesh, that was alive during this time, that had a model, Dechala the Denied One, now only known by way of Dechala Purple, a paint in the Games Workshop paint range. But she got a miniature, a multi-armed kind of Kali-esque champion of chaos. Also, that was in receipt of a model at the time, a Demon Prince of Slaanesh, Azazel, the kind of swan-winged Prince of Damnation. Now, I've got to admit, the miniature for this is a little bit... It doesn't match the description. The description of him is have long and lustrous flowing black hair, pure and brilliant white skin, soulful eyes. He's supposed to be the ultimate in kind of handsome, dreamboat characters, and the miniature looks like it's been sculpted by somebody's elbow. No apologies to whoever sculpted it, but the face does not match the description. But maybe that's the point of Slaanesh. Maybe it's, how he is perceived versus how he actually appeared. Nonetheless, he had a model. I know we're not doing kind of Demons and Chaos as one of the core armies of Warhammer the Old World at the moment, but Demon Princes are definitely part of the Warriors of Chaos army. And again, it would be ideal if he could make a reappearance during this kind of era. There's more though. There are still more. Galrach, obviously, we've mentioned. He didn't appear in the Champions of Chaos book, but came in the 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy book. He's been around for basically since the first War of Chaos. But other characters who were present in some form during this era. So Scylla Angrim. So this is in the time of the Champions of Chaos book, which of course is published for the kind of 2500 era of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. He was a massive Chaos Spawn, heavily mutated, his mind completely gone. And essentially you could take him as an addition to whoever your Chaos Lord was. And the Chaos Lord could kind of poke him and herd him towards the enemy, which he would then rend and tear apart. But at the time that this is set, he was actually still a mortal champion of Khorne. This was before his gifts from Khorne became kind of too much for his mortal frame to bear, and he mutated into a giant spawn. Scylla, actually, I think there has a model in the Blood Bowl range at the moment, so you could just easily use him if you didn't want to resurrect the classic metal miniature. Albeit, I think the classic metal miniature showing here is gorgeous. But what I would really like to see would just be rules for a mortal champion of Khorne, the biggest, mightiest mortal champion of Khorne. We could easily use any of kind of the Khorne Bloodbound models from the Age of Sigmar range to represent him, and it would be awesome to see him making an appearance during this era of kind of the Warhammer world. These are all kind of characters that have had models then, and there is one more honourable mention that had a model that is present, which of course is Sigvald the Magnificent. Yes, he of the reflective mirror shield that he likes to admire himself in. He was introduced in later editions of the Warhammer Fantasy rules, but we do know that he'd been alive and active for at least 300 years before 2500, so he is certainly present and, you know, prancing around the place being a really annoying Prince of Slaanesh during this era. It's somewhat interesting, I suppose, that Slaanesh gets some of the largest number of characters in this respect that had models for kind of the Chaos range for this era, at the very least. But yeah, Sigvald, of course, has a lovely shiny model in Age of Sigmar at the moment, which, interestingly, I have considered just putting some swan wings on the back of and using that as a Zazel for a Demon Prince, for a Slaaneshi Warriors of Chaos army. But he also, of course, has the older, original Warhammer Fantasy Battle Sigvald miniature, which you could then use, if Games Workshop chose to re-release it, as Sigvald playable during this era. There are two other characters that also featured in the background that we know were alive during this period, but never got models, sadly. One of those is Valnir the Reaper. Now, the way he's portrayed in the Champions of Chaos book is this kind of gross, Nurgle-esque undead skeleton in rusting armour, having been alive during the first war of kind of the Chaos, against the Great War of Chaos, the Siege of Prague. He took Prague as a mortal champion of Nurgle before eventually being killed by no less than the Tsar of Kislev, taking the Tsar with him as he died. His mortal followers took his remains back to the Chaos Waste and ensconced it on a throne. And some 200 years later, Nurgle went, "Oh yeah, him. Go on, up you get, on your feet." And this kind of decayed and rusted skeleton and clad in, you know, corroded armour was once more on its feet, spreading Nurgle's plague. And that's how he appears in the Champions of Chaos book. But there is nothing to stop them from releasing a Valnir the Reaper model as a mortal warrior to fight and appear at the Siege of Prague, where, of course, we know he's a vital figure. The final one I want to mention, who never got a model, but is by far one of my favourite characters from the Champions of Chaos book, and actually put in an honourable appearance in the End Times, one of the only ones to make an appearance in the End Times novels by Black Library, and that is Count Mordred. Count Mordred is this honourable Knight of Sigmar who gets cursed by the Chaos Gods to essentially become this constantly roiling Chaos spawn within his armour. Count Mordred the Damned. So he's essentially longing for death. He's like the Highlander if the Highlander was nothing more than a squirming mass of tentacles inside his armour. He can never be killed. The Chaos Gods refuse to let him die. He roams around the mortal realms, around the old world, trying like mad to find somebody who can finally put him out of his misery. And the Chaos Gods just chuckle and roll the dice and let him go again and again and again. This was, again, reflecting the rules that no matter how much you killed him, he would just keep coming back. And he had the most kind of crazy random stats that you rolled for at the start of the game. Then you had to re-roll at least one stat every turn. So he was constantly shifting and changing. He had a sword that the merest touch of which could turn enemy characters into Chaos Spawn. He was brilliant! Games Workshop never gave him a model. They just kind of said, oh, use a Chaos Warrior in armour, because at the end of the day, that's what he looks like. He looks like, you know, a Chaos Warrior in armour. It's just that inside the armour, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what am I building to with all of this? Well, we know at some point, we're hoping Games Workshop is going to release rules for the first war against chaos. I keep saying the first war against chaos. The Great War against Chaos. The battle at Prague. And the kind of the rise of Magnus the Pious. How awesome would it be in the lead up to that, given that we've got the Warriors of Chaos book now, and they've got months. You've got months to kill, guys. You can crack one out in that time. How awesome would it be if they released a new edition of the Champions of Chaos book and gave us a re-release of all of these old models that they produced, and maybe a couple more. Maybe finally give Count Mordred a miniature. Maybe give Valnir the Reaper a mortal miniature. That would be amazing. I would suggest that this is an ideal opportunity for Games Workshop. If they miss this opportunity, then they're just leaving money on the table. But in the meantime, what I propose to do is to do a series of little shorts in the coming weeks, just giving a little bit more information on the background and the rules for each of the characters as they appeared in 5th edition. So keep an eye out for those in the near future. I am also thinking to myself that if Games Workshop aren't going to do that, then given I have at least 2 of the miniatures from Champions of Chaos, I may take a crack at writing some old world rules for those. I mean, if Games Workshop release their own, that's brilliant because they can then replace mine. But I'm thinking of taking a crack at writing my own for that, essentially extrapolating from things that we do have rules from 5th edition, like the Green Knight, which we then, of course, have rules for in the Arcane Journal for Bretonnians. That gives a baseline of comparison as to how one has transferred to the other. So I'm hoping to try and scientifically transfer the Champions of Chaos characters in the same way into the old world rules, and I will be putting those rules up on my Patreon for anyone who follows me there so that they can access those. I will also, hopefully at some point in the future, if I do this, be doing some videos testing out my homebrew version of the Champions of Chaos against a variety of characters that Games Workshop have released for Warhammer the Old World. I've got Burlock Damnison sat in the cabinet over there. I have got plans to get my hands on a copy of the Green Knight miniature, because he seems an ideal opportunity. The Green Knight versus Count Mordred would be just brilliant. That would be a battle of champions. But yeah, that is what I'm thinking. Let me know what you think of this idea in the comments down below. Let me know if there's any characters from the Champions of Chaos book that I didn't mention that you were a huge fan of. I know there's a couple of Beasts characters in there. I haven't mentioned those because I'm going to wait until the Beastmen book gets released at some point next year. But please let me know any other Chaos characters that you love, that you perhaps have come across in later editions, or that you've perhaps come across playing games like Total Warhammer. Warhammer Total War, goodness me. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and as ever, I will catch you next time. Bye for now.